Welcome to EWTN News Nightly. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell. Tonight's top stories. Obama's new ambassador to the Vatican sits down with us for an exclusive TV interview. We'll bring you his comments on the Pope, the President, and religious freedom, plus reaction from religious freedom advocate Robert George. Controversy over Common Core is heating up. We'll talk to two experts about how the new national education standards could affect you and your children. And it's the day before Halloween. You might be surprised at the images that some are using to market the occult. We'll bring you the details. Thanks for joining us. A top Obama administration official was grilled by members of Congress today about flaws in the Obamacare website. At a House committee hearing, Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius apologized for access problems that have been, quote, miserably frustrating for many Americans trying to sign up for health insurance. Sebelius was also questioned about a lack of transparency concerning abortion coverage on the health care exchanges. She said she was aware of the issue but did not know which plans cover abortion and which do not. One of Pope Francis's top advisors spoke to reporters this past week at the University of Dallas, where he gave a preview of changes that could be coming to the church. Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga, head of the Gang of 8 Cardinals that is advising Pope Francis on reform plans, said a new Vatican department for the laity may be in the works. Earlier in the day, the Honduran cardinal spoke about the relationship between lay Catholics and clergy, saying that there is no dual classification of Christians.
There is therefore in Christ and in the church no inequality. Neither the clergy are the men of God, nor are the laity the men of the world. That is a false dichotomy.
Cardinal Rodriguez said the importance of the laity was a central theme of the Second Vatican Council, a council that will come to fruition in the Church's new evangelization. A new class offered this spring at Georgetown University's Law Center will require students to work with a group known for promoting abortion rights. The elective course will have students working directly with the National Women's Law Center. That's a D.C.-based lobbying organization that pushed for abortion, sterilization, and contraceptive provisions in Obamacare. Critics say the course is just the latest evidence of Georgetown's waning Catholic identity. Georgetown officials tell EWTN News Nightly that the optional course will focus on a wide range of issues, and there are, quote, no assignments pertaining to abortion and certainly no requirement that students adhere to a particular set of beliefs. Declining funding for embryonic stem cell research in Maryland suggests that alternative research is more effective. That's the conclusion of a study to be released tomorrow by the Charlotte Lozier Institute, the research arm of the pro-life Susan B. Anthony list. The report found that in 2007, 68% of Maryland state funding for stem cell research went to projects that exclusively used embryonic stem cells. By 2012, that level had dropped to 4%, as most of the funding shifted to non-embryonic research. An earlier Lozier study identified a similar trend in California, the national leader in state-funded stem cell research.
Well, it's really a matter of what works. The scientists who engage in this have found that the embryonic approaches destroying human embryos is not yielding the cures and therapies that have been promised.
Not all agree. Michael Werner of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine told EWTN News Nightly that conclusions about the long-term potential of embryonic research are premature and can't be drawn from shifts in funding. Educators across the country are preparing for a change in their curriculum. Public schools in most states are implementing the Common Core State Standards Initiative. It's a program that's meant to align English and math curricula across different states so America's students are learning roughly the same skills. EWTN News Nightly's Wyatt Goolsby reports on who created the new standards and what they mean for students in the classroom.
High school diploma is not an end game. It is a launching point.
For the past 2 months, public educators in Maryland have been on a campaign, holding one public forum after another to explain to parents and students what the new Common Core standards mean for them. Maryland is one of 46 states in the process of implementing Common Core. The state superintendent of schools, Dr. Lillian Lowry, says Common Core principles raise the bar for what and how students learn.
They really force students, if you will, to
justify why they think what they think. So now in math, instead of just giving a right answer, they're going to have to demonstrate the processes that they use to get to that right answer, which really strengthens their math skills and which also enables them to retain that knowledge and carry it with them.
Common Core, which provides English and math standards for each grade, was developed in 2009 by the National Governors Association, a nonprofit organization made up of Republicans and Democrats that serves as a public liaison between the state governments and the federal government. Common Core is also sponsored by the Council of Chief State School Officers, a nonpartisan nonprofit, and has received funding from various groups across the country, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The purpose of Common Core is to provide a clear understanding of what students are expected to learn so teachers can better educate them. Lowry says one of the biggest points she has to clarify at public fora is that the Obama administration did not develop Common Core nor push it on state schools. Each state's education department had to voluntarily adopt the standards. However, critics point out that each state adopting Common Core gets financial incentives from the federal government.
The federal government has tied money through Race to the Top competition, through the waivers, to adoption of the Common Core standards. So in a way, they have indirectly endorsed these and nationalized them, so to speak, and made it a federal standard. And by so doing, they've opened up a can of worms.
The debate has also reached Catholic schools, where some teachers and parents are concerned about Common Core.
There's something called Appendix B that it probably causes the most upset among people because of some of the materials it recommends. But I point out to teachers and parents that that's Appendix B. It's optional, like the appendix in your body. You don't really need it.
Two examples of the high school readings from Appendix B that are causing controversy are The Bluest Eye and Dreaming in Cuban, novels that contain explicit sex scenes. Kathy Mears says the Catholic educators she talks to are avoiding implementing that type of material. But Common Core may also indirectly affect other educators, including homeschoolers. That's because standardized tests, including the ACT and SAT, are in the process of implementing Common Core principles. Homeschooling mother of 5 Faith Mervold from Manassas, Virginia, thinks that's a shame. She says Common Core's abstract, opinionated approach to math and omission of classical literature in English makes it a plan she would never use with her children.
It is institutionalized ignorance. It really lowers the bar so exceedingly low that most people should be embarrassed to forward this idea as being academics.
With Common Core principles making their way into public classrooms now, and most participating schools fully implementing them within the next 2 years, this national debate looks as if it will only intensify. As Faith sees it, the stakes are too high for parents to simply accept Common Core without question.
Always question who's educating your children, how they're educating your children, and what they're educating your children in. Because this is a one-shot deal with your kids, and you are in charge of their education.
Joining us now to discuss Common Core and the questions it raises are Lindsey Burke, a fellow at the Heritage Foundation who speaks nationally about education reform, and Jennifer Daniels, founder and president of the D.C. Council for American Private Education. Thank you both for joining me. Lindsey, I'll start with you. Education standards are not new. We had No Child Left Behind under President Bush, and it had supporters in both parties as well, of course, as fierce critics in both parties. But why is there such controversy over this new set of standards?
Yeah, standards are not new, that's right. But what is new is an administration pushing one set of effectively national standards and tests that will define what every child in public schools and potentially private schools and homeschoolers across the country will learn. And the Obama administration has used many federal incentives. There are many federal fingerprints on Common Core, which is why critics will argue that this is in fact a push for national standards and tests.
Interesting. Now, you said this is what's new about it, the fact that there are these national standards for everyone. But No Child Left Behind, did have the accountability measures for each state. How's that different?
So No Child Left Behind dictated to states the frequency with which they have to test, but it left to states what they would test, and it allowed states to define their curricula. Okay. Common Core national standards dictates what states must test, which is a whole new enterprise on the part of the federal government.
And Jennifer, you're dealing especially with private schools, and of course as a mother yourself, Catholic mother, and you formerly worked with the Archdiocese of Washington, you don't now. What is your sense of what the effect will be on kids in Catholic schools and in private schools?
Well, private schools by definition are autonomous, and that's the most important thing that private schools want to protect is our autonomy to teach what we want in our schools. Private schools offer unique sets of curriculum to meet the needs of the children in their schools, and that's a very important component. But as we see the Common Core being adopted across the country by so many states, you look at the business of education, the textbooks, the assessments, even the SAT is going to start being aligned to the Common Core. So it does appear there would be some certainty of spillover into the private schools just by virtue of this business of education.
But why should private schools worry if, in fact, as some of the critics say, these standards are, our mother there quoted, Faith, said, these are so low I wouldn't even bother teaching my kids what Common Core says they need to learn. So if indeed the standards are fairly dumbed down, do private or Catholic schools really have anything to worry about anyway?
Well, I think that all private schools should take a look at the standards and compare the standards to what they're already doing. And of course, many private schools will say, hey, our standards are above and beyond this. We're fine. We don't need this. And some schools might want to use it as a resource or use it as another approach to conducting their high-level curriculum. But what we as a private school community also need to keep in mind is that we do participate with the federal government and with state governments in education programs. So for example, under No Child Left Behind, private schools are able to participate in the Title I program, which offers academic assistance to low-income children. Many of our schools help low-income children. We wouldn't want to see in the future participation in No Child Left Behind being tied to participation or adoption of the Common Core. Second example, at the state level, we've got parents demanding school choice all across the country. We've got 16 states now with a voucher or scholarship private school choice program. We don't want to see the state level government saying you may only participate in a school choice program if your school chooses to adopt the Common Core.
And Lindsey, let's dig a little deeper into Common Core, because there seems to be sort of two tracks of criticism. One, as I said, is that the standards are so low, they're not even worth following. But then on the other hand, some of the defenders of this, and this isn't just a Republican or Democrat issue, we've got Jeb Bush out front, right, former Republican governor of Florida, who last month said at the National Press Club that critics of Common Core are motivated by politics and that they're people who are comfortable with mediocrity. And so he sees it more as a question of we're trying to raise the bar here in a country that has a major education problem, and these critics just don't want change. So how do you answer that? I mean, is there some good in these standards, or what is your criticism of the substance of the standards?
Well, and Jennifer brought up school choice, and I think that is the absolute best way we can think about raising the bar across the country, is providing parents with options, providing parents with the ability to choose a school that matches their child's unique learning needs. So I think that's the absolute best way that we can, in fact, raise the bar. Let me give you one example. Parents are now coming home not only from public schools, but from private schools as well. I work with a mother in Indiana who was concerned because her child came home from her Catholic school and had a new Common Core aligned math textbook. And the mother was concerned about the mathematics standards that were used, and she said she went to ask questions, but they said it's a new Common Core textbook. And she said at that moment she realized not only had the curriculum left her local Catholic school, but it had left the state. So I think many parents right now are asking a question, who do I turn to when I have concerns?
And what can we're almost out of time. What can a parent do if they are concerned about this?
I think talking to local school leaders is the best place to start in voicing their concerns.
All right. Lindsey Burke, Jennifer Daniels, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
We have to run to a break right now, but when we come back, we'll bring you our exclusive TV interview with Obama's new ambassador to the Vatican. Stay tuned. Welcome back to EWTN News Nightly. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell. Last week, we told you about Ken Hackett, the former president of Catholic Relief Services, who recently began serving as President Obama's new ambassador to the Vatican. This week, our Rome correspondent, Alan Holdren, interviewed Hackett about his new job. Alan began by asking the ambassador for his impressions of Pope Francis. Take a look.
Oh, this is amazing. in terms of his focus on the poor and generating kind of an interest for well, the Christian faith in defining what it is you should be doing for the poor and who they are and how they should interact in your life. And don't just allow, don't pass that individual who's homeless on the sidewalk. Think about the policy and structural issues that cause people to be poor.
On October the 21st, the ambassador was officially welcomed by Pope Francis as the U.S. envoy to the Vatican. Hackett and the Pope spoke about the points of convergence between the Holy See and the U.S. government.
Our government, and particularly this administration, is deeply concerned about issues of poverty, injustice, marginalization, deeply concerned about issues of war, concerned about issues of persecution of minorities, particularly Christians, and their constraints on freedoms of religion around the world in horrible places.
Some critics of the Obama administration have said that Obama isn't concerned enough about the plight of Christians in other parts of the world and that he's neglecting religious liberty back at home. They say that this has created tensions. Do you see a tension there?
The Obama administration and the Holy See interact positively and work together on many, many issues, religious freedom being one of them. There are issues where there's disagreement, but friends can disagree. And I would say that we are much more focused on where there is a positive interaction and collaboration will lead to real changes, peaceful changes, opportunities for people who are distressed. I see the positive.
Under Hackett's watch, the U.S. is marking 30 years of full diplomatic ties to the Holy See next year.
That was Alan Holdren reporting from Rome. Joining us now from Princeton to discuss the Obama administration, religious freedom, and the Catholic Church is Princeton professor Robert P. George, who is chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Welcome, Dr. George. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Colleen. Thanks for inviting me onto the show.
Well, Dr. George, as you heard, Ken Hackett, the new U.S. ambassador to the Vatican, characterized the controversy over religious liberty here in the United States as a disagreement among friends. But we have some 75 lawsuits winding their way through the courts right now challenging the contraceptive mandate that's being pushed by the Obama administration. I should mention EWTN, this network, is among those lawsuits. In fact, the network just filed a new one jointly with the state of Alabama to challenge the mandate on the grounds of religious liberty. So would you agree with Hackett's characterization that tensions on religious liberty at home are sort of just a disagreement among friends?
Well, Colleen, it's Ambassador Hackett's job to accentuate the positive, to spin things as favorably as he can for the administration. He's an appointee of the administration. I don't begrudge that, but we don't have to believe it. It's not true. There are very, very serious disagreements between the Catholic Church, both considered as the Vatican, and as American Catholics, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and so forth. Those lawsuits concern very fundamental issues of personal and religious freedom. The Obama administration has insisted on pushing these mandates on religious people, not only Catholics, but evangelicals, Orthodox Jews, people of all faiths who have real serious problems of conscience, bending to a mandate to supply, for example, in insurance policies, abortion-inducing drugs. And then there are other questions about U.S. policy abroad, pushing a radical pro-abortion agenda, which is what this administration's agenda is abroad, pushing a radical sexual liberationist agenda on countries that view things more in traditional terms when it comes to sexuality and sexual morality, in terms more in line with the teachings of the Catholic Church, for example.
Dr.
So I'm
George,
afraid the situation is not nearly as...
I want to get into that in a second, and I just want to ask you first, though, Ambassador Hackett had characterized this in one interview, in a separate interview. He had said, yes, we do have this tension at home, but let's not let these healthcare issues distract us from how we can cooperate together overseas. So at least the picture he seems to be painting is that the Vatican, in its focus on other international religious freedom issues, is able to work well with the Obama administration. And I'm wondering how much the domestic issues of religious liberty impact the ability of the church to work with the Obama administration abroad on some of the issues, you know, that the church cares about, certainly?
It's not simply a matter of the domestic religious liberty issues putting the church at odds with the Obama administration. It's also the Obama administration's agenda abroad to push the liberalization of abortion laws, to weaken protections where they exist for unborn children, to advance the cause of sexual liberation, to cause nations that do not subscribe to a liberal belief about sexuality and sexual morality, cultures that reject those beliefs, to cause them to yield to the Obama administration's own liberal views on these things. These are very serious issues that go beyond our domestic politics.
And you've mentioned, Dr. George, in your criticism of the Obama administration, I know in one article, this question of freedom of religion versus freedom to worship. There's been some criticism of the Obama administration for emphasizing the freedom to worship, but not a more robust idea of freedom of religion. What's the difference and why does it matter?
Freedom of worship certainly is part of freedom of religion, but it's far from the whole of freedom of religion. And if we reduce freedom of religion merely to freedom of worship, we will have evacuated much of the substance of religious freedom from our policy. Freedom of worship means the freedom to pray in private settings, in your home, around the dinner table or at bedtime, in your synagogue or church or mosque. But those are private settings. A robust and sound understanding of religious freedom is one that understands not only the freedom to worship to be included, but also the freedom to move from the private sphere into the public sphere, to advocate publicly one's faith and one's religiously inspired moral convictions, one's convictions about justice and the common good. To be relegated to the merely private sphere for religious people is utterly unsatisfactory because our faith, and this is true of all faiths, not just the Catholic faith, our faith impels us from the merely private into the public domain to stand up for what's right and good and just.
And would you, in your capacity of chair of the commission that you're on, would you say that the Obama administration, in looking forward at what the administration's priorities should be on this issue, do you see points of convergence where the Vatican and the administration can work effectively together? Or do you think the religious liberty problems at home are such that it's going to be impossible for the administration to really fruitfully work with the Vatican on these issues abroad?
Well, now you've asked me to speak as the chairman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, so I'm not expressing my own personal views here. I'm speaking on behalf of the Commission, and we are certainly at the Commission doing everything we can to work with the administration and to encourage the administration to be stronger and more active in protecting and helping persecuted minorities, especially religious minorities, in places like China, in places like Iran, in places like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. We want to encourage the administration on. We've seen some helpful things, that's true, and I applaud the administration for the steps it has taken to help to protect those minorities. But more can be done and more needs to be done. And we at the Commission are urging the administration to do more, bring more pressure to bear on governments that can do something to stop persecution within their jurisdictions.
All right. Well, Dr. George, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, tomorrow is Halloween, which means you'll likely be seeing plenty of little ghosts, goblins, and witches at your door, all looking for candy. Most Catholics consider trick-or-treating a harmless pastime for the kids. But what about other forms of fixation on the paranormal? A 2009 Pew Research Center poll found that 17% of people who consider themselves Catholic had consulted a fortune teller or psychic, something the Catholic Church forbids. And as EWTN News Nightly's Jason Calvi reports, sometimes Catholic images are used to market the occult.
Someone left this image of St. Jude on my windshield. But on the flip side, it's an ad for a curandera. That's someone in Latin American cultures that provides herbal healing, counseling, and in this case, fortune telling. These days, curanderos are often found in stores like this one, called botanicas. Inside, you'll usually find a mix of statues of the Blessed Mother, crucifixes, and herbs. But images may have a double meaning in Santeria, a Caribbean pagan religion with West African roots.
So the practitioners of Santeria at one time could not have statues of their own gods, so they used Christian saints as stand-ins for their own gods.
And right next to the candle of St. Francis, you'll find Juan Dinero, Mr. Money, a candle some light in the hopes of gaining cash.
White magic, in a way, is an attempt at coercion. It is an attempt to get God to do what I want.
South African Father Tabang Gadamang is a missionary oblate of Mary Immaculate. He says these things aren't as harmless as they seem.
The devil today always tries to find a door in which he can enter people. You see a picture of Our Lady, you get deceived in these places, and you say, okay, I'm going to go there and get this, and then they offer you from horoscopes to palm reading, etc., etc. And you consent and do that, but you don't realize that you are giving yourself in to the temptation of the evil one.
Father Gadamang says turn away from the occult and toward God.
Scripture is enough for us. The Bible, the Word of God is enough. Why should I be looking at a newspaper to know my fate, if you like? And there's no one who can really interpret the future. Everything is in God's hands.
Amen to that. Finally tonight, while Pope Francis was speaking to a group of families in Rome on Saturday, a little boy decided to join him on stage. As you can see, the two became fast friends. The little guy ignored several attempts by cardinals to return him to his seat. He stuck right by the Pope's side and even gave the Holy Father a hug. We're out of time, but be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And you can catch our entire program again on EWTN's YouTube page. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell, and on behalf of all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.